All right, welcome to the Haunted Hacker Podcast, episode 22, I think it is now. I can never keep track of that. Anyways, tonight we have Alton Johnson as co-host. Alton, go ahead and you can unmute. Also, Mike, go ahead and unmute. And video. Cool. What's up, Mike?
What's up, dude?
Not much. So just going to go over some news and then go over some housekeeping, and then we'll crack on. As far as the news goes, there's not a whole lot going on except for they had a 22-year-old guy in Kansas, I believe it was, here that hacked into a water treatment facility and had plans to do some damage. He got caught. I think he's facing 25 years now in prison or something really drastic. So that's that. Of course, new malware comes out all the time. I don't even try to keep up with that stuff. Anyways, so with that being said, tonight we have Mike. Mike has a really interesting background, and before I get into, before he gets into telling the story, I ran into Mike on LinkedIn actually, and we shared a lot of the same connections, a ton of the same connections as far as red teamers go and pen testers. And I think, as a matter of fact, I think I supervised one of the guys that Mike worked with at one point. Anyways, Mike, so why don't you introduce yourself, give us your background, whatever you can't tell us. We'll go from there.
Yeah, dude, it is like fucking awesome to be here, man. Really, really happy to be here.
Cool.
So yeah, I'm coming at you from the USS Defiant. Not sure if you can
Nice.
tell. This is my bridge right here.
Cool.
But yeah, so it's I guess the best way that I can kind of describe myself is I'm a Army PSYOP veteran, turned web developer, turned software engineer, turned pen tester to SOC analyst, and then just kind of made my way up the kind of SOC command hierarchy. And then so now I during the day I lead the security operations department for Block Harbor Cybersecurity. So it's basically like the tip of the spear for automotive cybersecurity. So we work with many OEMs and like tier 1 and 2 suppliers to make sure that the vehicles and what they put in the vehicles are actually safe. And we do a bit more than that too. That's just the easiest kind of broad brush strokes I can do here. And then I am the CEO of a startup called Defiant Networks. And Defiant Networks is aiming to make networking as safe and secure as possible. We've got our own suite of protocols that, we have overlay networks and cloak networking, identity networking, things like that. And we got started in the IoT space and ICS space, trying to secure all that, the cyber physical connections. And we've been kind of abstracting our model out a bit to make it a bit more open to everyone, not just the industrial side. Basically a new internet, pretty much.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. That's pretty awesome. So yeah, you had mentioned that you served in the military and you did I know you did some stuff for probably JSOC at one point, right?
JSOC and JSOC adjacent.
Gotcha. So did you do anything like really cool when it came to military? Anything you can talk about that was like the highlight of your career as far as military goes?
Yeah, so I went into PSYOP. I was the second to last class. It's like the 18 X-rays for Green Beret, but it's the same thing for PSYOP, where it's like you don't reclass into it. You come in off the street, and not a lot of people get in. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize until like way after the fact. I did that for a little over 4 years. My first deployment. So for those of you that don't know, PSYOP is essentially being kind of like peddling influence to make it so that whatever AO you're in or area of operation, the people in that AO, they perform actions or lack of actions that make it a conducive operating environment. Basically, just like make the place safer. Yeah, and then not just that too. There's also lots of campaigns to like increase shit like personal hygiene, just like good practices, things like diet, sanitization, stuff like that, to make the people safer too. So, and then I was in a 9th Battalion in 8th Group. 4th side group was really big when I came in. So right after I passed MOS training and went through SWIC, they kind of split it into two. So I was in the only active tactical SIAP battalion. So not like at the district or embassy level, but more so like actually on the ground, living in the villages and the district centers with the police, the governors, the whoever's there. It differs, but yeah, I spent time in Panjshir province and in Kandahar.
Awesome.
So yeah, it was a lot of interesting stuff.
So what made you go from that to cybersecurity?
Nothing. Yeah, there wasn't like a driving factor. It was I got out. I did my 4 years. That was my initial plan, because I went in, wanted like college and school and all that. Didn't have a patriotic bone in my body, and I said I was going to get out in 4 years, and then I get out. I'm like, man, I don't want to do this forever, but it was still really cool.
Right.
Probably not anything I'm going to be able to do like that again on the private side. So I was just on the GI Bill, going to school. I was going to I don't want to name drop. I was going to a school that got shut down like five years back or so, because they were doing some like shady for-profit stuff. And I was doing that, and then I was doing like some local stuff too, because I was trying to be a history teacher for high school. Because like my first deployment, I was teaching the Afghan commandos and their ANASF how to do PSYOP. And for them, it was kind of like a skill identifier. It wasn't an MOS; it was a skill identifier. So they had like a nice little. They called it. It was the Dari word for negotiator, which I forget. There's like a tab on top of their whole tab stack they had. I really loved that feeling of being in front of a classroom on a highly elevated surface, looking down at people. And I'm kidding. I really did like teaching. I really did enjoy teaching. And yeah, so I was literally just going broke. And one of my buddies, we went out for beer one night, and it's like maybe 7-8 years ago, and he's like, dude, you should just monetize something you're good at. And I'm like, well, I do web design. I've been doing that since high school, just for shits and gigs, And I grew that, and I hustled like one of those, literally putting out Craigslist ads and responding to Craigslist ads and doing that over and over again. And eventually the word got out that I did, like good enough work, and I was just getting more contracts. And then eventually it turned into me working as a software integration engineer for a fintech company. And when I was there, like I was writing a lot of like glue code and shit, like API stuff. So like you have a lending bank here, then you have customers here, then you have e-commerce stores in front of the customers. And so you have a system that bridges everything.
Gotcha. And
so I was writing the code that allowed the stuff to work from lender to system to e-commerce to system, back and forth, right? That got me working in a lot of different e-commerce platforms. So like, name almost any of them. I've probably worked on it. Anything from like Shopify to Magento to Xcart, 3D Cart, OpenCart, anything that ends with cart or begins with cart. is Columbia. And lo and behold, a lot of the stuff that I would be writing is essentially what like MageCart does.
Oh yeah.
It's like scraping payment details, but sending it to an okay thing versus my thing, right? And there was backend stuff though too. Like if you're working in Magento, you'd have to do the integrations in the backend for them and stuff too. But when I was in there, I realized that there were a lot of things like my brain just started firing off going, dude, if I was a shitty person, I could totally steal all this stuff, right? And lo and behold, it turns out it's actually a whole career field. And I didn't really know that.
Wow.
And so I decided, hey, I'm gonna break into this field somehow. There wasn't really a clear path, and I would also argue to say there's not one now. It's all different, but LinkedIn will tell you otherwise.
That's right. That's right. So will the Navy.
And everyone who is getting out of the Army and hitting me up, which is totally fine. It's one of the hardest questions to answer though.
Yeah.
So I try and help with what I can, but I feel like I just give shitty advice because it's not going to apply to them. But yeah, so I didn't have, there wasn't really a school path at the time for that. Maybe a coalescence of a few different things, and you can market yourself in that way. But I just did what was in my nature, kind of still is. I said, fuck it, and set up an LLC. And then I spent that time, like I've been to a few different schools, but I've always been an autodidact. Like I've always been a self-taught kind of guy. Because I don't like people telling me what is. I need to reason that out for myself.
Yeah.
And build my own, it's like first principles thinking. I have to build my own mental models from it. I can't just get your take on it, even if it's a good take.
Right.
And maybe I did come to that same conclusion, but I got to do it myself. So it's me and the same really good friend of mine that told me I should monetize what I'm good at. We did this together, split ownership, and all we did was just get together every night and just we were setting up our own boxes to attack, basically like little mini CTFs. Like this is before CTFs were actually like a big thing. It was more of a closed thing. Like you'd have your buddies come over and you say, hey, you want to fuck up my server? and do that over beers, and that's it.
Yep.
And we did that. We got to a point where we're like, okay, we're confident enough with OWASP, with web testing, mobile testing. We're, because we're both developers at the time, right? Like he actually had an engineering VP job for a big bank at the time too. So I mean, we had a good knowledge base put together, and we're coming at attacking hacking that field from developers. So we knew how software worked. We knew what areas of the stack would be best to look at, et cetera, et cetera. And we actually got clients and just kind of went from there. We had some few locally big, well-known firms reach out to us because at the time there wasn't a lot of that going on. Right. It just kind of grew from there. Eventually ended up working from pen testing, ended up working at a co-located SOC, like a firm that had their own SIEM platform, a really awesome SIEM. It was actually I believe it was the first commercial SIEM to have Elasticsearch as the backend.
Oh, nice.
It just from there, just kind of snowballed. Like I worked on I was taught by people from like the previous, hacker generations, the people that did a lot more stuff in the the 80s and 90s and whatnot, back when it was a lot more of a obscure field that had a lot more vague legalities around it. So getting to learn from
it's more of a culture. It's more of a culture than an industry back then.
Yeah, exactly. And so people in the previous generations are kind of really did the hard work to pave the way so that I would be able to have a career that I wouldn't get arrested for doing.
Yep. You're all
Um,
welcome.
yeah, I mean, I didn't want to age you out or anything, but um, um, but you did it for me. So
Yeah, it's I think what's really cool is talking to guys that are the next generation that came in at the very beginning of like the certifications and how the industry like started developing. And the people who got in at that point, that was like the sweet spot, right? So the guys that came in with me, we didn't have any of the schools or training or certifications. It was, you get in trouble and, oh, he can do something that he probably shouldn't be able to do. So let's give him a job. But now with all the certs, and this is kind of a question I wanted to ask you, since you have exposure to the old school and then plus, the new guys coming in, how do you feel the certification process is damaging or helping the industry? And I'll give you my opinion afterwards.
I need another beer for this one.
Yeah. I hear you.
So by the way, this is Eagle Brewery banana bread beer. Oh, you can't even
Nice.
see it.
Can't see it yet.
Look, I'm invisible. Oh, wait, there you go.
Awesome.
It's pretty good. Yeah, so I don't, yeah, that's an interesting question because the mindset of certifications opening doors for you, I'm never going to argue that.
Mhm.
Ever. I'm never going to argue against it because it's true, but there's nothing saying that those doors stay open, right? It's like you can get an interview, but it's really hard if you don't know what you're doing.
Mhm.
And then there's that cyclic issue of, okay, well, if I have no experience, how do I get experience? Yada yada.
Right.
And I actually answered this question recently because I posted something on LinkedIn. I was making fun of hiring managers for saying, things like what you expect when you hire someone with a cert.
Mhm.
And it's like the computer's broken and someone comes in with a cape. He's like, I'm certified. I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Like a stack up of people who can't solve a problem just because they have just certs.
Yeah. And I personally, just being who I am, I've always felt it was kind of a racket.
It is.
But at the same time, I can't say that you don't extract value from that.
Mm.
So
that's the hard part. I think that's the hard part is that there is value, right? There is a certain level of value.
It is, but you're kind of crystallizing or cementing into hiring culture that without these certs, you're garbage.
Yep, absolutely.
And that I don't like. So yeah, I posted this thing on LinkedIn. Someone reached out to me and they're like, on the post, they're like, I get what you mean, but how can I prove it? I'm like, I think the responsibility is actually on the employer.
Right.
To, like, for me, I did a lot of a decent amount of conducting technical interviews for prospective SOC analysts and stuff, SOC analysts or threat intel kind of stuff, and more so it was pretty technical stuff where I'd put together scenarios you'd have to solve. And the one thing I noticed is that all the people with the alphabet soup after their name, the big list of certs that was bigger than their experience, they didn't do very good at all. Giving them things like okay, you get an OSEC event. Here's this raw OSEC event. Tell me what you would do. And it was a scoring system from 0 to 100, right? So the same scoring system, A, B, C, D, that kind of thing. F was a big one. I would notice that a lot of the people that did have a lot of the certifications, and even like when they were just putting out master's degrees for cybersecurity, they'd have that, they wouldn't do that good.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the easiest thing ever, but it wasn't the hardest. It's like, I just need to know that you're above a line. That's it.
Right.
And if you do good or bad, or if you're way above that passing line, or if you're not, it's like that will help if there's more people that pass over that line too. But The best person that I ever interviewed was somebody who was like a SOC analyst at a major pizza company. I think it was like Domino's or Pizza Hut or something for only like a year.
Mm.
And he passed it. And he even beat like some of our guys by like 2 points. I think like the highest score we had internally was 92 out of 100, which to me, if you got over an 80, you're gold, because a lot of it was like super depth of knowledge and very granular and microscopic.
Mm.
But yeah, so that was kind of an eye-opening thing for me. Granted, I don't know if I had a large enough sample size to cement that as fact. Like having certs equals bad.
Right.
But it was just a funny, it's a funny correlation. I'm not saying it's causation. It's probably just like a spurious correlation where there's probably something that I just don't know. But I did find that interesting. I don't know. I really think that you need to understand it for what it is that it's a business.
Right.
And during that time, if you're just breaking into the field and you have certs, like, yeah, I think you're worth looking at for sure. And it shouldn't be, can you hit the ground running right away? Because anybody who's going to interview somebody that has certs but not experience, you need to know that they're going to have to be a student in that position.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do have the experience, then yeah, I'm going to be like, okay, this guy's going to hit the ground running. You have to have a management of expectations, and I think entertaining even like 1 or 2 layers of nuance will really help that versus just the flat, like you meet these requirements or you don't, move on.
Yeah,
that's just me.
I totally agree, and I think that when security certifications like the ethical hacking stuff first came out, I saw some benefit for people actually getting it until I saw the actual coursework. And the coursework is what ruined me. So when I open up a book for, let's say, the CDH, and one of the sections of the instruction is talking about a specific tool called Donald Dick, it's like, wait a minute, that's so old. Who's updating this material? And so you're right, it is a racket, because a lot of these companies will expect you to renew your certification X frequency, right? So not only are you paying $5,000 for the boot camp, but then you're paying another $300 for the exam. And then every year you have to take the test again. So what is that, like another $300, $400? So you got that revolving revenue.
Go
ahead.
Yeah, because from a year or 2 years ago, the software that you're certified on actually increased. It is a couple of subversions newer.
Nice.
And if you, I'm just kidding. I don't know if I can, just go on the website, look at the damn changelog. There, you're certified.
Yeah. I mean, there's a ton. And the funny thing is, like, when I first got into the industry, like, I really thought that getting certs was going to be the answer, and that's what I should do, right? So I went and took the test. I challenged the test for one exam, and I thought, man, this is way too easy. So I just sat down with access to SANS. This was when SANS was still giving the exams online. Like, you could take the exams online. And I think I tested for something like 4 or 5 SANS certs in one sitting and passed them all. And then SANS came back and put me on an audit list and wanted to look over my testing and the logs and make sure I didn't cheat. And I thought, just because I didn't take your, $5,000 course per exam, per certificate. But I think that, and it's gotten out of hand on LinkedIn too, because you look at, the people who are cold contacting people saying, hey, here's a list of certs, which ones do you want? And I'm like, none. And don't contact me, because, first of all, cold contacting someone about certification is just really poor ethics and really bad etiquette. And then, some of them will actually get frustrated. If you don't answer them right away, they'll get frustrated. And I've gotten to a point where I just don't answer them, because if I have anything to say, it's going to be bad, because they just harass people.
I did work a slew of sales and marketing jobs between when I left the military and when I started doing like web design and stuff. And I will say, it's either you're ignorant or it takes balls if you're gonna cold call. Yeah. And if it takes balls, I'll respect the hustle. I'll tell you to be like, no. Yeah. But there's a small part of me that goes, man, I know what you're going through. You'll get a sale. It's just not me.
It's just not me.
Yeah. Wish them the best. And
Sure.
ask them to not message you like that again.
So let's get into the beef of it. Let's talk about some SCADA. Let's talk about some solar winds. Let's talk about some, water treatment facilities and how bad the U.S. critical infrastructure is sitting right now as far as health-wise goes.
I love how it's not, we're going to talk about it. We're just going to go right to how bad it is.
Pretty much. But the reason why I want to get into it, so I have a special place in my heart for SCADA and for like the power grid and all that stuff. I worked for an electric company when I first got out of high school and was a meter reader. And then I actually climbed poles as a lineman and did all kinds of stuff. So I got to see like switching facilities and dispatch centers and stuff like that, seeing how they distribute the power and look at the timing and stuff. What I thought was really kind of scary was the fact that all these SCADA systems and most of these electric companies run on some really archaic technology. And a big part of that too is because a lot of these companies, like especially the power company that I was in, it was a regional power company. But the problem was they didn't have anybody within the company that was actually that tech savvy. They had tons of people who knew how to, create circuits and run underground lines, stuff like that. But when it came to security and actual, like, how things are supposed to communicate and operate, they didn't care as long as it worked. And I think that's the problem with a lot of industries is that, as long as the technology works, security is an afterthought. And I think that's what we're running into with a lot of like this solar winds and the attacks like that is that technology has been sitting out there for so long and it's such legacy equipment. But the problem is that nobody's been keeping up with it. And the ones who have, I mean, if you look at, let's take SolarWinds, for example, and he downloaded the update for the Orion stuff on that platform on a repo. I mean, really, we're going to have government agencies and government, 3 letters that are working off of open source repos for updates. So
you know what? I blame all those security people that tell you to update and patch your systems. If you didn't do that, the SolarWinds thing would have happened, man.
That's right. True.
No, no. I mean, technically, if everyone just decided not to update, that wouldn't have happened literally. But yeah, so it's an interesting thing because I've only been in the ICS and SCADA and industrial IoT space for the past 2 years or so. So it's not a long time. But what happened was I was head of security services for an international MSP at the time, and our CEO just kind of not like he whipped something at me, but he put something at my desk. I'm like, the fuck is SCADA? like what is this? Okay, supervisor control and data acquisition. And is basically we were subbing for a contract to secure the major metropolitan transportation, like light rail system.
Right.
And I had no idea what the hell that stuff was. But I mean, I'm a pretty quick study, and the past couple of years of my life has been completely saturated with cyber physical stuff in general. It was actually, no, it might have been a bit earlier than that. I think we got the timeline wrong. It might have been 3 years or so now that I'm thinking about it, because it is 2021. I keep thinking it's 2020. That's how you know this year's going by pretty fast. So yeah, so I get this, and I'm shown diagrams, and I'm given like asset lists and stuff like that, and I still don't know what the heck's going on. When I went on site, there's like a facility where they put together the cabinets. And I went to that facility, and the people that were another part of that contract were people that I knew. So I'm like, hey, what is all this stuff, man? It's like, caveman looking shit. It's like, dude, you're talking about what I do for a living. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Well, I'm here to test it. Yeah, it's a lot of old stuff, and it's a different mindset, when you're coming from the IT security like me, I look and I go, oh my God, this stuff's all outdated. Holy shit, what is this? But really, it's not so much about that, because these things aren't supposed to be touching the internet. It's more about, are these systems resilient and robust enough to not get fucked with, to not spin down, to, I say spin down, to not, get shut down. Really, the CIA triad is a little bit different in this case, because it's really safety and availability than all the other stuff.
Right.
And FYI, I do have dogs around me, and this is a time of day where people start to walk their dogs.
Yeah.
And for good lighting, I had to sit near a window to keep it open. So if my dogs start barking, I'll
And no worries.
shut the
No
blinds real
worries.
quick. Yeah, so I mean, you do have a lot of these old systems, and it's like that for a few reasons. It's really about having, again, robust, long-lasting systems. If I build this really rugged, a stack of machines, right? These PLCs, RTUs, PID controllers, things like that, they're supposed to last for like, 10, 12, 15 years.
Right.
Because you don't want to tell an entire town like, hey, you guys aren't going to have electricity for a week while we update all these systems, and do it again next month when, Windows releases like another subversion update, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a completely different system. So that means that you need to have these disciplines and models in place around that to make sure that they don't get messed with.
Exactly.
So when I got exposed to the Purdue model, that's when I realized that people that say they follow the Purdue model normally don't. The air gap is a lie. Santa Claus isn't real. I say the air gap is a lie.
Pretty much.
The air gap exists, but no one knows how to actually apply it.
Exactly.
So I swear to God, like 2 nights ago, I read an email, sorry, not email, I read an article someone posted on LinkedIn, and I only saw it because this one guy that I follow in the ICS space, there's only a few people, but one of the guys I follow, Joe Weiss, if you just go to LinkedIn, type in Joe and then WEISS, the man is prolific in all the ICS stuff. I love reading what he puts out. He replies to an article that he read the article and goes, wait, who checks their email on a SCADA server?
Ooh.
I'm like, no way. So I read the article, and the article, it might have been like some Kaspersky or some like big name like that. Nah, I don't want to name drop.
Yeah.
You can find it on LinkedIn though. I'm pretty sure you just look at anything that Joe Weiss had commented on, you'll see it. It's like, yeah, 2021 or 2020, statistically, a lot of ICS computers were hacked with malware from email. I'm like, dude, what do you mean ICS computer?
Right, exactly.
And I think that's a kind of like a little a couple degrees removed marketing tactic to be like, hey, I actually work for this IT security company. We can like secure your email SCADA server.
Right.
That's not a fucking thing. that's not a thing. I don't know. It does get me really aggravated to think about, because there are a lot of really good people out there that do know what they're doing on the ICS security side.
Yeah.
And then there's the people that just like hawk material to be like, hey, Oldsmar wouldn't have happened if they patched their systems. And then it's like, well, now there's this whole conversation about, do you really know what is going on there?
Exactly.
And it wasn't an IT problem. I mean, granted, technology was used in the attack, but I think people see the word TeamViewer and they go, oh, update patch, add a new password, change your passwords.
Right.
To me, I'm like, why the hell is that on the internet?
Yeah, I think that one TeamViewer from Florida hadn't been updated since like November or something like that. And here's the bad part is that nobody knew that it was connected to the internet. Like nobody knew that TeamViewer is exposed to the internet. They used it internally. So it was like, how did that system end up on the internet without you even knowing it? Like, here's my thought when it comes to ICS and SCADA. I think that everybody, should have to get the regulatory compliance pen tests and scans, here's the deal: if you have anything that's open to the internet or exposed to the internet, it should be an immediate fine and shut down until you can fix it. Because that's minimal. I mean, if you can't lock down your perimeter and you're controlling all the nation's water or that county's water or electric, there should be some accountability there. And I think the reason why we've seen so many gaps in security is the fact that there is no accountability. You know, a lot of companies would rather take a fine than actually do the work. So, but
You see that in a lot of industries.
Yeah, for sure.
Like some like on the automotive side, you might see if there's some kind of flaw with like an old vehicle, it's like, well, is it more expensive to recall the vehicles and fix it, or is it more expensive to pay the fine? And then the business decision is whatever is less money.
Yeah.
And that, you see that in a lot of industries too, not just automotive. Automotive's actually been doing a lot better on the security side, but
for sure.
It's a bit more fresh in my head, so I'm just using that as an example.
Yeah.
I mean, it's actually pretty funny because the UN has a good few compliances and standards that they say you need to adhere to, but then America and Canada, they're like, nah, man, fuck it, free market.
We got our own shit.
Yeah, and so, but what happens is, because like if you're an OEM or a supplier and you want to have your equipment or vehicle or equipment in the vehicle on European roads, you have to apply to these things. You have to adhere to these things. So even if let's say that I'm an American automaker and I want my vehicles to be on Europe, I say Europe because the differentiation between like, Europe, EU, UK, Britain, all that stuff is still a bit of a kind of like a geographical mindfuck to me, just because like
muddy puddle.
Different times.
Yeah.
Like I watch a few podcasts from guys in Britain, and that's all I know. I know that, and I know Boris Johnson, but anyways, if somebody wants to school me on that, I'm more than happy to read some stuff. I just haven't gotten to Googling that lately. But if you want to have, like, let's say that I'm an American automaker and I want my vehicle to be operable, or my equipment in the vehicle to be operable on a European road, like in Germany or something, I need to apply to or adhere to something like UNECE WP29 or TSAX or something like that. So even though you might be an American or a Canadian OEM, I don't know if there's any Canadian OEMs. I'm just kind of speaking, broad here.
Right.
You've got to adhere to the standards, even if you're not actually obligated to follow them yourself in your own country.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. It's pretty funny how that works.
The way they have that set up, especially like I don't know if you've like reviewed any of the ERCOT stuff or anything like that, or like the commissions, the different energy commissions from different states. My dad was involved on. Go ahead.
No, I said no, but go ahead.
My dad was involved in ERCOT, which is the Energy Regulatory Commission of Texas, I think. And they got put through the ringer hardcore just recently. He's been retired for a while, but they're responsible for pretty much the darkness in Texas when Texas lost electricity for a period of time. And I mean, little things like that. And just over the years and looking at different companies and the way that they deploy the SCADA systems, really the SCADA system manufacturers and the software developers, like the software is really good, but the way that industry works is very odd. There's not a lot of tech savvy guys in a lot of the smaller electric companies or refineries, which makes it very difficult to do any kind of security because you have to liaison with their tech guy, and majority of the time, you're left with someone who probably shouldn't be working help desk somewhere. So that industry as a whole, I mean, it's so critical and it's so connected. I think the problem came about is when they built out the system to begin with, the grid to begin with, and didn't have enough forward thinking to realize that one of these days everything's going to be controlled by the internet, right? So you have this this electric grid and you have the internet, two of which, I mean, the internet, yeah, of course, has been orchestrated and, architected really, really, definedly, very specifically. But then you look at the ICS environments and that industry as a whole, and bringing those two together, bringing technology and the infrastructure together was so painful because that infrastructure has been there for so long. So, which brings me to my next question. As far as like the wave of attacks that we've seen over the past year and a half, and I want to go back before like the pandemic because we started to see a transition during that time period. Um, as far as like nation states getting more active and the attacks starting to change, but what do you see the most prolific and the most dangerous attack coming up like in the near future for, let's say, 2021 2022?
So the one thing that scares me a lot, and I'm surprised that we haven't heard more about this. So in so right now we're in the fourth industrial revolution, right? We're past industry 3.0, which is just like computerizing shit. Now we actually computerize everything, we sense everything, we detect, collect, aggregate, analyze, all that stuff. And in industry 4.0, in this time frame, industry 4.0 is a time frame and also a thing that's happening in technology. In industry 4.0, there is the marketeers call it IT/OT convergence. And the ICS people that I talk to just say, yeah, that's stupid, hyperconvergence, that's what we'll call it.
Right.
So what that means is that you have operational technology, which is industrial control systems, but it can also be things like in automotive as well, or it could be things in like medical technologies, because it's a great idea to have a pacemaker connected to a fucking app.
Yeah, I have one. Yeah, I had to have Medtronic shut down the Bluetooth on my pacemaker. And when I first went to them and told them that I needed it turned off, they thought I was crazy. They said, no, we need that to communicate with it. And I said, no, you don't, not 24/7. So again, that goes back to security mindset in those industries is very far removed because it's not their core competency and it's not what they're worried about. As long as their device works, they don't care. And so here's this time bomb sitting in my chest where they're like, oh, Bluetooth, no big deal.
Yeah. So I'm glad you got that disabled because that is something that should not be a default setting.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I'll go back to my point. Then I have a whole slew of shit on medical devices too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so in Industry 4.0, you have all this hyperconvergence or IT/OT convergence, as the marketeers say, and it's really just the connectivity between operational technology, really cyber physical technology, any technology that has a cyber interaction that turns into a real world reaction in the 3D physical space. Connecting those to like managerial and administrative and analytic systems and services over the internet, which means you've got to have some semblance of communication existing.
Right.
And typically industrial control systems, when you do like with the old smart attack, I saw it more of a policy folly than anything. Just because like it's actually not that irregular to have people like your maintainers or engineers will remote into something and then work from there. And those timelines are very strict and very rigid, very controlled. It's like, okay, every third Tuesday of every month that begins with a consonant at 3:37 to 5 a.m. we'll do something like that. Something that's stupid, ridiculous, right? Yeah, but very obscure, very not easy to predict.
Mhm.
And then it's a non-scheduled schedule. So like you might, do something at a different time next month or something. But
Right.
you have these, and it's all really just like kind of in the know stuff. And so in general practice is to have like third parties write it on that shit too, so that policies for everyone. So when I was reading, I wrote an article about this, which is the thing I posted on LinkedIn that a buddy of mine shared, across the entire ether, and that's how me and you started talking. In it, I had talked about the engineer that realized that there was stuff going on. He said that it didn't stick out right away because having people like come in and use the system was a regular thing. Like, all right, red flag right there. Okay, shit's open all the time. Shouldn't be open. Okay, cool. So I got that, and I keep reading. And for me, the fact that you have, I guess going back to the original question without going too far into the rabbit hole I'm about to dig here, or that I'm trying to keep myself from digging too much, is the thing that scares me that I'm surprised hasn't happened yet, is you have industrial control systems, you have PLCs, you have SCADA systems, you have I've even found photovoltaic control systems at like colleges and stuff that power a whole wing of their campus on solar, right open on the internet. That stuff is open so that you can talk to it, so that you can have something hook in, grab shit, come back, you got on a dashboard. For me, the scariest thing, I don't want to call it a prediction, but it's something that I've been working to prevent for the past few years now, is compromise at a large scale of the systems exposed to the internet. I am going to say the number, when I've, over the past few years, like I've hit Shodan up many times. And when I go on Shodan and I just look at Modbus port 502.
Right.
Early 2019, like when I gave my first talk, like my first don't put your shit on the internet talk, it was at like 23,000 or some stupid number. Now it's at 6,000. Well, I maybe checked a few months ago, it might be less or might be more. But no, technically it's actually up to like 13,000, but something else uses port 502 now as like a standard port. So you have to be a little bit more surgical with the messages or the search queries I'm showing in. But anyways, for me, the scariest thing is just that there'll be a kind of widespread mass compromise of internet exposed devices. And these devices, whether they're SCADA services or servers, or whether they're, God forbid, a PLC on the internet. Just because you can network it in a way that you can access it remotely. You can write pretty easy broad code to just DOS these things easy. Like I think I did a recent test for something that I won't name. It's not just like some kind of little fly-by-night small PLC in an escalator or something. It's something that people use. You can DOS it and hit it with 100 packets over 7 seconds. And it goes out. Yeah. So like my fear is that these things are connected to something that will just cause everything to go down. It's kind of it's a broad fear. So there's not an easy fix for all of it, but it's not just like Modbus. It's also the S7 and Profinet things exposed to, and because people just put these things on the internet so that they can hook in and make life easier. It's like it's a convenience thing.
Well, I've even seen people put stuff in a DMZ and put it in the DMZ because they couldn't get the individual port forwarding to work properly. So they made that device the DMZ device.
Well, I can hit it, so it must work now.
Right. But all the other services are out there hanging out too. It's like, some of these people really should be architecting networks. One thing that I find really really interesting is the different types of devices hitting, like sitting out on the internet, like you spoke about, and going to Shodan and looking at the results from the queries. Another thing I like to do too, and they've made it so easy, developers have to take advantage of the entire internet. When they came out with mass scan, yeah, mass scan is really noisy and probably not the best thing to do, best thing to run when doing like a pen test or whatever. But I used to do it. I used to use mass scan and scan whole country blocks, like entire countries. And let's say for like different things that are exposed to surveillance systems were key, because over in some of these foreign countries, they would throw all these surveillance cameras up and not change the passwords. As long as it connected and they got the console inside the palace or inside the embassy, then they were good. So here's all these like really sensitive cameras sitting out everywhere. But that's another thing when it comes to that industry as well. Like let's take the power grid, for example. Those guys that work on the lines are leathernecks, right? They're rough guys. And the guys who work dispatch and who have to have some sort of technical knowledge are normally the guys who get moved up from being a lineman and they move into a desk job and become a dispatcher. So they still don't have that technical knowledge, but because they put the time in, then they get moved up to a more sensitive spot, right? But while I was working at that company, and this is a decent sized electric company, not once I see them have some sort of technology training seminar or internet or anything like that. Nothing that would give them, that would benefit them in helping secure their network. And I don't think that goes on a lot with those companies. Yeah, the corporate side of it, absolutely. Like the big buildings in downtown Houston and Fort Worth, you know they're doing cybersecurity drills and testing every once in a while. But when you look at the guys out in the field, and that's where the real data and the real sensitivity is out in the field at those PLCs that control those pumps and to report that data. And I think what really got me like excited about SCADA was when I went out to DHS and did my red team, blue team or like kind of drill or competition out in Idaho. And the idea of being able to hit a device on the internet and watch a pump overflow or burn up, like really got me going. I like the physical result of the cyber action. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. But I think as far as like the future goes, my thought is, as far as like SCADA and ICS and IoT, I mean, everything that comes out now, like the new Alexa, and now they have video for the Alexa that can go into your bedroom and stuff like that.
You got a hook into Alexa that you can access from a fucking smart toilet.
Now. Yeah. And they even have they have an in-map module for Alexa now too. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to develop some code to where not running in-map, but taking those results from in-map and being able to somehow get Metasploit onto Alexa and actually exploit from Alexa. I think if I can get to that point, it could be one of those mass compromise deals, because if you hit one Alexa, why can't you hit the rest of them? Mm-hmm. There's going to be ways to do it. And especially like when you look at Shodan, I did a talk for Hertfordshire Police Department over in the UK not too long ago. And before the talk, I did a real quick query on how many Chromecast devices were available on the internet. And there was over 7,000 Chromecast devices that were just ready to go. And so I showed them the exploit, and how to take advantage of Chromecast. But I think the IoT and SCADA is going to be huge, because as far as nation states go, they've been inside our critical infrastructure for a very long time. And what's your opinion on that, Mike, as far as like nation state and ICS and that stuff goes?
I knew that this was going to be asked at some point. Because people ask me this all the time, like, oh, was this Russia? Was this China? I'm like, okay, so you got an IP address, right? It's definitely not that fucking country.
Yeah.
And so the way that you make those decisions, oh, by the way, now I'm drinking Golden Monkey by Victory, which is a 9.5% beer that does not taste like it, and it is fucking dangerous.
Is that an IPA?
It is a Belgian style triple ale with added
nice.
spice.
Nice. That sounds
Yeah.
really good.
It's a
Yeah, it does.
9.5 that scares the shit out of me because you don't feel it until you're doing something important.
Yeah,
Uh,
like a podcast.
yeah. Well, I mean, the way I'm looking at it though is like this is more of like just a hangout session where like I got to the bar early and I just drank while waiting for you guys to come.
Yeah, and that's the whole purpose of this podcast too. Like I've had people ask me, what's a podcast about? And a lot of these podcasts, they do like vendor specific stuff and they try to sell you something. I'm like, no, man, we sit around and drink a beer and chit chat and talk about real shit. That's what it should be.
I forgot I'm actually supposed to be hawking a shit ton of services at you guys now. Gotta put on the Defiant hat to match the shirt here. Nice. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna do that. Yeah.
No, go ahead. Like I totally dig like this small startup culture because I came from that. So this is a great place for people with startups and with small companies that are just starting out. Man, plug that shit. That's what we're here for. We want to help the people that are just getting into the industry or companies that are just starting. So
I don't think it's very easy to tell where an attack comes from. And I feel that when you have a lot of people that just read articles that say this, it's oh shit. What is it? It's the I think you can Google this to make sure I'm right. The Gelman amnesia effect. It's like everybody has their own things. They're kind of like an expert, or they have their own acumen. And like if I were to read an article that says I don't know shit. Like I like exercising and going to the gym. So if I read an article that said you should take creatine before you go to bed, I'd be like, fuck no. Why would you do that?
Right.
But then I read another article on the next page. It's like, oh, I don't know, something weird.
That's beneficial for you.
Yeah, like you just read something that you don't know and you go, oh, I didn't know that, you know? And so I think a lot of people have that with the security side. Like it's interesting to a lot of people. It's interesting to a lot of people, but they don't really know a lot about it. So they go, oh yeah, Russia, of course.
Yeah.
Duh, Putin.
Yeah.
I don't think that's always the case. I think these are just kind of like,
well, it's the media. It's the media as well. I think the media plays a huge part in vilifying different countries.
Yeah, I mean, the media tells, I'm going to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but the media tells you what to think.
Yeah, exactly. There's no conspiracy in that.
I know that because, like being PSYOP where I was, like we were the deciders that decided what you saw, what you what you thought, what you consumed, everything. And the game, it's PSYOP with American characteristics, American media characteristics, I should say. Yeah, I mean, but really though, I don't think it's a lot of like I don't think it's like a huge conspiracy concerted effort. I think it's a lot of standalone complexes where all these things are happening and they're all kind of like in the same way. So you look at it and go, oh, conspiracy, but it's really just people acting in their own interest, and those interests align a certain way.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of those people have predetermined plans too, as far as like end goal or whatever.
Yeah.
So as far as like, coming into the industry, people coming in now, if you could give someone straight from college, advice, don't make the same mistake I did or whatever, what would be the best advice you could give to somebody that's coming into the industry right now?
Yeah, I would say I've talked to a lot of people that are trying to get in, and I think like something I said earlier, I give I say terrible advice because the way I got in was like such a weird, unconventional way. I have these people coming at me with certificates and degrees. They're like, what should I do? I'm like, well, I don't fucking know. Like, what interests you? Um,
Mhm.
and you know, if you can say I want to hack stuff, or if you want to say I want to find stuff, right?
Right.
Like, okay,
Right.
I can work with you. I can
Mhm.
kind of like help you do the navigation dance, right? Um, but I think a lot of people think there's a very direct, straight route in,
Mhm.
and I don't. Maybe you're gonna have outliers that just go, I just got my degree and went right to fucking Cisco or AT&T or whatever, right?
Right.
And if you could do that, awesome, like really awesome, because I had to do a shit ton of work, and knowing that somebody was able to get in without having to do that, normally that would be irksome, because like, well, they didn't have to do my shit, but um, I'm actually proud of that, because it means that in some way we've gotten to a point where we can inject people right in the industry.
Yeah.
But don't expect anything just because you have, especially college age people coming out of school and whatnot.
Yeah.
Not to pick on them, but it's going to sound like I am. Don't uh, feel that there's any kind of entitlement that's owed to you because you have it. You've got to be very humble.
Mhm.
Gotta when you try and get into security, you're going to be real close to stuff right in front of here. But it's like Dave Chappelle said, you're too close to the elephant.
Yep.
You've got to really take a step back and understand what you're looking at. And as a student or myself, when I was coming in, that was really hard to do, because for me it was just like, bam, pen testing. That's all there is, right?
Yep.
But really, like once I got in, it's like if you I look at security. I don't like saying the security industry because I don't really care much about the industry. I just care about the future generations being safer.
Right. Right.
The only two things I care about: the future generations being safer, and providing you know good children for the future generations. Because like I have one, I'm about to have a second one, and then I also used to teach.
Whoa.
So I've done my provision part for now.
Absolutely. Congrats.
So thank you. Yeah, we have he's going to be 2 in a few months. Another one coming in, coming out, I guess technically, November 1st.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I think really, what did I say? What was the original question? What advice would I give? Yeah. So I tend to look at, cybersecurity as a whole, not like in just the industry, but just everything, the security piece. I look at it kind of like a sporting event, like a NASCAR race, right? Is the easiest thing that I can think of. Not because I'm the biggest NASCAR fan, but the metaphor works in that you have if the race car driver and like the on the ground pit crew are the red team, the pen testers, the physical, technical, and then you have the folks in the stands and the engineers that keep the cars running and all that. Those are the blue team.
Mhm.
And then somewhere along the lines, you have a purple team,
Yeah.
which is kind of a new practice. At first, I thought it was just like a scheme to create jobs, kind of like Walmart cards.
Yeah, I'm not too sure about that. Let's dive into that a little bit, because that's a good point. That's a fairly new term that people are starting to use like a buzzword.
Do you mind if I take a quick break?
No, go ahead.
Be like 2 minutes. I have to go check something in a room with the sink in it for a couple minutes. I'll be right back.
Sure. So I'll dive off into that area a little bit, and also some other things with SCADA. When people are coming into the industry and like looking at different ways to go, look at different types of information you're going to protect, whether it be healthcare, whether it be, like you said, automotive, manufacturing, or military, or whatever. Look at the type of things that they protect. For me, the SCADA part of it was really cool because it's such a complex system. And there's so many moving parts to it. Like every valve, every pump has some sort of ones and zeros that the SCADA platform actually controls or helps moderate the activity and operation of that pump or that valve or whatever. And then realizing, I saw that movie. What was it? The Bruce Willis movie where trying to blow up the world, and I bring in the hacker that sits behind the console, and he's like trying to defend this SCADA system. It was called Hard to Kill or something like that. But anyways, like that really like got me excited about SCADA because there's so much of it and it's so critical, but it's so messed up. Like the places I've been that have SCADA systems or that have industrial type networks, majority of places I've been, really like if I would have known that our country was supported and carried on top of some of the networks that we have, people would be a lot more scared if they knew the truth about some of those networks, I think. So Alan, what's your experience with SCADA and with ICS?
I haven't actually did a lot of testing in that area. I've just kind of, seen some talks. I've actually watched one of his talks prior to the call, but I haven't been like in a position, I guess you could say, like to actually test one of those just yet. So this is very interesting for me to kind of see what's out there on the other side of things.
It's SCADA is a different world.
Yeah.
And even the people that you deal with, I mean, you're dealing with, so with oil and gas and with electric, it's the good old boy system, right? It's a bunch of guys, most of them are probably related in some form or fashion. Very, very simple guys and very like to the point. And a lot of them have no idea what they work on, what they control has so much influence, so much power within the US. I think that's where another failure is at. But welcome back, Mike.
Yeah, I checked the thing. The thing I checked was good, so we're back.
Good deal. So let's dive off into some other areas and like within your career. So one thing I like to do is take like kind of a self-assessment periodically and look at some of my big accomplishments and some of my like disastrous failures. Because they all play a purpose, and I don't look at any failures as being negative because they've all helped me in some way in my career. So with your career, Mike, what would you say your biggest accomplishment is? And, for lack of, better terms, what do you think your biggest failure is? Not to sound like a job interview or whatever, but if you could just shed some light on that and how you got through it and how the industry helped you get through it.
I was half expecting you to ask where I'm going to be in 5 years, where I see myself.
No.
And if anyone does ask that question, I would say I refuse to answer that question because every time I do, in the time span, it becomes a lie. So it's like, where do you see myself in 5 years? With your job, and then I'm off working somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly.
But so a second, it just got dark outside, so I have to adjust the brightness of my screen because that's what Mac does. It just decides that I can't have control over it. So that's, I think for me, I would relive and redo every single mistake because I do learn things quickly. I learn things by myself, but a lot of that, like growing up, I remember a specific instance where it wasn't a stove, but it was a curling iron that my mother had said was hot. I'm like, well, what does hot mean? And I found out. Every single mistake that I've made has made me a lot better. I would say I'll start off with the biggest mistake. When I got in earlier on, when I got more into the blue team side of things, I was on I was definitely on the more left side of the Dunning-Kruger effect, where like the Dunning-Kruger effect is this thing where like the less knowledge, like when you just first start getting into an area, your confidence skyrockets, but your expertise is like low.
Yeah.
Everyone does it. I did it too. So my biggest mistake was when I first got into the industry. The industry, I hate that term. When I first started doing security, on the blue side, or red side, I was actually pretty good because I already had a lot of knowledge from being a developer and software engineer. But when I got into working in a SOC, I looked at it technology specific. I didn't back up and see the bigger picture. And it did end up hurting me. So the people that like these the older generations that taught me how to act on a SOC, like these are really legit people that I still thank even today, just because they taught me how to conduct myself on a SOC and how to how to understand what's noteworthy, how to tier up and elevate or escalate your alerts and all that, and then what a security operations center should be, and even like how to just apply SecOps to anything. But I looked at it a lot from a technology specific side, where now when I'm working with people, and if we're on a security if we're, like I lead the security operations center for Black Harbor. So what that means is that's the security operations center for like automotive OEMs that we monitor, secure, do vulnerability management of their cyber physical systems. So it could be manufacturing, could be diagnostics, etc. Don't just like if you're working in Splunk, if you're working in ArcSight Logarithm, don't just be good in that. Like, don't be just good in that. Like, step back and understand it. Like, if you're technology first hurts you in the way that you're not going to be useful somewhere else. They might be using a different technology. And that was something that I felt crazy like early on. That's the biggest mistake of mine. It wasn't like a single thing. It was just a mindset that really that did send me back a bit. Gotcha. Or that held me back, I should say, not send me back. My biggest success, and that's actually a harder question to answer because I don't know what gauge we're using here.
Being on this podcast, is that
I mean, so yeah, my biggest. Well, I will say I did a lot of podcasts last year and then back in 2019, and then I stopped doing them because podcasts got so saturated. I'm like, oh, fuck, this is a waste of time. Yeah. And then I got exposed to yours. I'm like, oh, this is new, and there's like actually really good guests on here. And after watching Alton's podcast on the talking about Vanaheim and how he got to his position, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I actually like that shit. Yeah. And so I it just kept getting better and better, and I was like, all right, well, few podcasts are actually, I don't know. Again, like I feel like it's not an argument to say they're saturated, but very few are actually good quality. And that's what I like about this, because it's not like, hey, here I am, plug my shit. It's like, no, we're gonna have a conversation. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, you talk about like companies and products and stuff, but there's a bigger picture to that. It's not the plug my product cast. It's we're just gonna hang out and chill cast. Yeah. Today is a cancel cast. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. That's the way it should be for everything. I think you're right. The podcasts are saturated. I think over the past year, if I was to calculate over a year, I think I've done probably 60 podcasts. But a lot of them they range from very high production quality and very like scheduled and bam, 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 everything's got to be the same way, and it can only last this long and very strict, to the opposite, the complete opposite, which is ours, which is, we just sit around and bullshit and talk about life and our jobs and what's really important to us. So you have the whole gamut. But you're right. Like this whole podcast was actually just, a simple thought over a beer one time. So the same thing with you, like, ideas come out of the bar really quick. But yeah, like, when it comes to failures and successes, right? So I look at everything I've done in the past, no matter if it was a failure or a success, I still equate it as a success, right?
Mhm.
Because I failed, I may have failed that time, but with that failure, it's helped elevate me to a different level to where I can look back to the previous failures and correct it. So I don't look at anything as being, dreadful or I regret this or I regret that. Do I wish things could have been different? Yeah. I mean, there's been times, especially within the last year, that I wish things would have been different. But
And if they were different, you
Mhm.
might not have learned.
true.
The
Very true.
thing. And that's why I go back to like even like the biggest failure of like looking at at things technology first, and that held me back.
Mhm.
And I would even do that again because without that I wouldn't have the perspective.
True.
And perspective is a big thing for me. Like, uh I don't know. Like I prize people that make a lot more mistakes than successes because they know what like both sides look like, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But okay, so I guess my biggest success, and I spent a lot of time doing a lot of like the active front end work, doing a lot of pen testing, doing a lot of technical plumbing and setting up and programming. And granted, I'm not like the biggest programming advocate,
Yeah.
but it is very cathartic to me.
Mhm.
Just like washing dishes is actually very cathartic to me. Like I don't complain about it.
Right.
I don't want to do it all the time.
Right.
But I would say I look at I guess I'll look at success in the lens of highest impact.
Yeah.
So what I've been doing the past couple of years is I try and inject myself in a place where whatever I do is going to have ripple effects. It's gonna proliferate through all different layers. And I guess the biggest success for me is through my time testing industrial control systems, through my time speaking at different conferences and doing panels and podcasts and all that. I used to think that was the best way to influence a lot. It's a good way. But for me, I started getting into writing a couple papers. I wrote really just one actual paper. I wrote one framework. I wrote a fuzzing framework called Fluff. Friendly, lightweight, unified fuzzing framework. It's on my site. If you go to mikecurnow.com,
Nice.
it's on there, and it's I'm actually presenting it this month in at CarolinaCon.
Oh, cool.
If you go to carolinacon.org, I'll be presenting then. I don't do as many conferences now just because I'm pretty busy, but I'm trying to do things that are a bit more novel versus I had like a whole run of don't put your shit on the internet talks, and they were all a little bit different, but say the same thing.
Yep.
And that's not my biggest success, the Fluff framework, but realizing that I can publish things and post things, create frameworks and bodies like that, that I was told they were being taught in 2 different schools.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, oh, it's pretty cool. So it's basically like, there's that. Then I also wrote this paper. It's also on my site too. Intro to cyber physical systems integration security.
Nice.
So basically, like going back to Industry 4.0, there's like 9 pillars, and I forget them all, but it's like big data, predictive analytics, additive manufacturing, et cetera, et cetera. And then there is the two that stick out to me is cybersecurity is a pillar of Industry 4.0, and then system integration. And so, being that I've worked in the IT/OT space a lot, the IT/OT, that hyper-convergent space where you're trying to juggle, like, oh, this should go to this, oh no, it's insecure, oh shit. I wrote a paper called Introduction to Cyber-Physical Integration Security, Cyber-Physical Systems Integration Security, because I wanted to shine a light on the fact that through my experience, I have not come across anyone tackling that as a practice. So I literally wrote a paper that articulates my own practice as a wider practice. And it's been looked at by a few bigger names in the IoT Industry 4.0 space. And for me, the biggest successes are things like that, where I've taken like I've done a lot of the hard work on the front end, and now I just step back and go, okay, this is how I think things should be done. Let me try and hawk this at people that'll disagree with me. And then when I get good feedback, I'm like, shit, I could have sworn they would have told me to do it myself. So those are big successes for me. Defiant Networks being the big one. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to say Defiant Networks is my biggest success, but only because I realized if I take a step back and trying to work on bigger frameworks and bigger practices, and then pushing that to people of influence that can make this happen, that's a huge success for me, because I want to have a huge impact, but it's got to be at a layer where it's feasible for me to do with all the stuff I have going on.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest part, is balance. Balance is so tricky. Especially when you're a public speaker. Balance is like, I have not been able to master it, and I've been speaking about for 2 years.
Yeah, I don't think you do master it.
No.
One of my favorite people, I don't like to look at security people as like famous, whatever, Twitter, talking heads and all that. But one of my favorite people in the security industry, I'm gonna plug her really because she's plugged me a few times last year. Alyssa Knight. I've been on her podcast a few times. She does some really awesome shit. And she, like, in 2019, like we were like chatting. It was either on Instagram or LinkedIn back in 2019, and we're just kind of like, shit shooting about her talking experience. And I was like, oh yeah, I did like 6 or 7 this year. She's like, oh yeah, great. I'm coming back for my 12th. I'm like, oh shit. Wow. And then I started talking with her a bit more, and then, getting on her podcast and whatnot. I'm like, well, here's someone that's got, a little bit more experience than me on the talking side, really prolific personality, has done a lot of really cool shit. And I don't even know if she's mastered it, And I say that because the core competency there is security, and she'll go off the grid for a few months and come right back with like some crazy shit, like, I just hacked 30 medical apps, or sorry guys, I was writing a book on how to hack cars. I'm like, and you know what? There's not a balance to that, and it works out for her,
Yeah.
So I don't think there needs to be a balance. I think there just has to be a management of expectations.
Yeah, and that's the hardest part. So I've been like trying to juggle, like writing courses for the ever growing certification racketeer group. So I've been writing a couple of those, and then doing the public speaking and the talks and the podcasts. And I don't think a lot of people really understand what goes on behind the scenes. What all goes into what we do. It's not just throwing on a t-shirt and jumping in front of an audience in Cairo. There's a lot that goes into it, and the amount of stress that goes into it is pretty hectic as well. But when I look back at different people I've met, hopefully I've been able to influence at least one or two people. In my mind, my thought is if I can get one kid to not make a dumb decision, then I'm good. I'm golden. I've played my part. Really, I do this because I enjoy, talking. And this is a way to like get people together during pandemic and really just, chit chat, something we haven't been able to do for ages. But then when I started seeing all the issues with, IT and solar winds and then the election, it's like, podcasts do serve a purpose. I know a lot of people in the IT security industry, like poo-poo on the whole idea of podcasting. Like, they don't really respect the whole podcast, group, I guess. It's more of, they want to do conferences. But to me, I've really settled into this whole podcasting thing. I think we can reach a lot more people and make a bigger change through podcasting than actual conferences. I do miss conferences at big time.
I do miss conferences, but I think it's more so because I would see the same rounds of people there. Like in North Carolina, like we have especially the 919 chapter, the DC 919 chapter, really good people. And I talk a lot of shit on the Slack channel, but I really do miss seeing everybody at all these different events, right? So like B-Sides, RDU, Kakalaki Con this year got canceled, which, there were some legitimate reasons and concerns behind it, but I hated hearing that.
DerbyCon got canceled too, right?
DerbyCon?
Yeah,
I think that was
a couple years ago, right?
Yeah, I think that was that hasn't gone on in a little while, I don't think, but I know that some of the DC 919 people were active patrons of that as well. And I used to go speak at like I would go to like B-Sides Asheville, like the furthest part of the state, and I would still see my 919 people there. So
that's awesome.
it was always a good thing to see, to kind of be around a group. I'm not the most social guy. I'm PSYOP has built a lot of kind of like bad habits in me that are a lot of different facets of, some might say, like, I guess like paranoia, but for me it's just caution, right?
Yeah.
But the people that I have known for a while, like I'm gonna want to hang out with you. This whole thing does suck,
right?
But I don't know. I was about to get political for a second, but I'm not.
Oh, feel free.
Yeah, well, shit. Hold on.
I'm probably the most anti-government person you'll ever meet, given my background and what I've been through. So political opinions are completely fair game to me. So
yeah, so I think the government is capable of a lot of really good things. I'm going to keep this very, very compact here. I think the government is capable of really good things. They have resources, they have manpower, they've got brains and brawn. But I don't always think the people that are the deciders are the ones making the good decisions. I don't know.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like there is a lack of, there's a legitimate medical ailment going on. It doesn't hurt most people, but the ones that it does, it's not very good.
Yeah, I've had it twice.
This is one of the few. The one thing I think about is in Japan, it was, I can't remember the exact timeline. It might have been within like the past 20 or 30 years. There was a huge, it might have been like a nuclear plant explosion or meltdown or something.
Yeah. What was the name of that? Started with an F. Fukushima. Yeah.
In that scenario, you had a legitimate thing that happened. And you had the older generations going and saying, hey, we've lived our lives. We're going to go and help clean that up so that the younger people don't get affected. In this, we have the opposite. Younger people are going through some really bad stuff, and it's being kind of enforced. It varies between state and country. but you have the younger people being pushed back, and self-harm and suicides happen, and drug dependencies form, really bad things that a lot of people aren't talking about. And that's that's happening to protect the old.
Yeah, it makes no sense.
And it makes, there are a lot of arguments to say, you know, there are people with comorbidities, and being the libertarian guy that I am, if you want to eat an entire McDonald's, I don't care. Like, dude, I like we did our part to make sure that you can.
Yeah.
So, but then the lines of personal responsibility get blurred,
Yep.
right? So, again, it's legitimate thing that's happening, but I think the way we're handling it is not so great, because it's very, oh my God, what is the term? We're dealing with this with a sense of austerity,
Right.
just the most severe thing possible, and it should be a more nuanced thing.
Mm.
This is a weird thing I'm going to do, because I don't like doing this, but our governor in NC, Roy Cooper, at the beginning of this, my whole thought was like, yeah, what the hell are you doing, man? Like, just stop this. And then the past 5 or 6 months, after his reelection, of course,
Yeah.
he does start handling it with a sense of nuance that is actually reasonable.
Mm.
Like, oh, okay, that's, I wish you did that before, but like, I kind of feel that that's a good example, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, you have some people that go, open up right away. I'm like, all right, well, if you do that, personal responsibility, fine, whatever.
Yeah.
You have California, which is like, nope, it's actually worse.
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly.
yeah, that's not good either. You know, like austerity on both sides. You gotta, I don't know, it's like the Titanic navigating around a bunch of icebergs, you know, like, don't speed through it, just kind of, you know, make course corrections, you know.
I think at this point we're still on the Titanic, but we're trying to avoid running over people, because our entire country, from the political state all the way down to the health state, is just an absolute mess. You know, when I came back to the States, I guess it was last September, it was culture shock. You know, being in Europe, being in the UK for 2 years, it was like, you know, I got used to the people there, I got used to life and politics and how things ran. And I get back here to the States, and I kept asking myself, is this the same country I left? Because it doesn't look like the same country. You know, with all the craziness and all the protests and just the nonsense going on, it was just like, you know, first of all, I know why I had to come back, but I really wish I didn't have to, because it was such a mess. And then the people here, you know, the US has some great people in it, don't get me wrong, but the ones that I tend to run into, and the ones that tend to feel like it's okay to talk to me, are usually the ones that probably shouldn't be let out of cages. And I say that in the very nicest way, because they're probably the rudest people, and probably the most uneducated, and probably the most dangerous people. But it just seems like, in general, the IQ of the country has just gone down since the pandemic. And it's like, at what point is this going to turn around? We can get back to work, and we can get back to what's important, you know?
I don't think it's so. I'm one of those people that believes that IQ is a hard thing to measure.
Mhm.
So like, I definitely see what you're saying. I don't think it's always an up-down scale. Well, granted, I guess generally it is, but
Mhm.
if I have an higher higher IQ than you, but you know a skill better than me, I'm gonna shut up and defer to you.
Right. But these people don't. These people don't, and they'll be the ones that grab your curling iron 24/7.
Well, they're gonna see that shit's hot. No, I had a guy at a local gas station, like right down the road from me, start talking to me. Like, he was a guy, I think he either managed or ran. I think he managed the convenience store. It's like a BP or something nearby.
Mhm.
And it was my so like my father passed away back in 2009, and so every year on his birthday, I drank like a tall boy of Budweiser, because that's what he did, because he had a sclerosis of the liver. And so the doctor's like, hey, you shouldn't drink again, you'll die. And every birthday, but Ed's like, yeah, fuck that. So I did the same thing ever since he's been gone. And so I went to my local gas station. I get the tall white Budweiser. I put it on the counter. The guy just says, "Hey, let me ask you a question." I'm like, "This is not gonna be good." He goes, "What do you think about these vaccine passports?" I've been thinking about this actually.
It's crazy, man. It's crazy.
That day.
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, I think it's not a good thing." Because most people think about this whole thing from, I think a lot of people, I try to think about it politically. I think a lot of people do look at it in a good way. Like, there's like, hey, I don't want people to die. Dude, me neither. That's why you do. But I don't think we need to be tackling things from this level of pragmatism, because it's a very right here, right now solution, but you're setting the tracks to go a future implication for bad things.
Right. You look at the way that they've treated Asian Americans, like assaulting Asian Americans. Can you imagine the flashback that people would have if we took it to a vaccine passport level?
Yeah. So I've had someone tell me that someone come at me from like a pretty nuanced approach and say, probably not in the US, but if you were to travel abroad, maybe. And I thought about that for a second. I go, okay, well, maybe. I don't think a passport is a good idea, but you know, like going to a bunch of different countries, I had to get different vaccinations,
right?
Just so that I didn't die, you know?
Yeah.
So like there is definite room for nuance, but I think that we should consider this as a natural part of the viral soup that we combat every year.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah,
I totally agree. I totally agree.
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of those guys that I haven't had a flu or sickness since probably spring of 2015. Wow. And before then, I haven't had anything since 2009. And it's very rare that I do get sick. When I do get sick, it's really bad. So like I attribute that to the cocktail of crap that the Department of Defense injected into me, which I partly thank them, because I feel like that's why I haven't been sick for a long time. But still, you know, I mean,
yeah,
nuance. You gotta look at it contextually. When people pass these very austere bills and measures, they're typically geared towards city communities, but they don't take into account the rural and suburb type areas, right? So yeah, I mean, it really is about nuance, man.
Absolutely.
And politics hurts that. Like I don't care if you're a Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative. I care if you're authoritarian or liberal for sure. But you know, there's a nice middle area that we can all, you know, have this giant Venn diagram of shit that we all agree with, you know?
Yeah.
And,
I mean, this country was definitely not the same country I came back to. And just within a matter of 3 years, I mean, it's just sad to see the degradation that we've gone through in just 3 years. And as far as like the industry goes, like to me, the US cybersecurity industry seems so oversaturated, right? Like to get involved and to actually like really help out, it seems to be so difficult here as opposed to like when I was in the UK. I mean, if you wanted to get back, you wanted to help out, you want to go on the speaking circuit, the opportunities are there. But here it's very different. And it seems to me like we've beat the buzzwords to death and it's oversaturated. And it's just going to take some time for us to, you know, get back to where we were. But, you know, it's just, we get a lot of the people who probably shouldn't be mentors, mentoring people because we have so many people right now.
Yeah. The bar is set pretty low.
Yeah.
I can't say that everywhere, but I've realized it too. Yeah, I mean, the security industry is an interesting space because there are a lot of really good people in it. I don't agree with all of them, and
Right.
I probably disagree with most of them on some things. But I mean, I don't know. They really are. Uh, hold on, give me a second. Someone's yeah. Sorry, give me a quick second here. I don't know. It's like there is there is a lot of saturation going on with like, especially right now, I think kind of skyrocketed that,
Yeah.
where we see like every conference is now basically a webinar,
Yeah.
and every I don't know, it's like so many things could just be like an email at this point.
Right.
I don't really, I don't know. It's like I don't want to I don't want to paint like a bad picture, but it's like I think people just need to find find things most relevant to them and then just stick with it and not like just go for everything out there.
Yeah,
I mean
exactly.
that in terms of YouTube, podcasts, besides this one, conferences. I don't know. It's really, I've been paying attention to the same conferences, the same things I've been doing for a while, and I haven't really strayed much from that. But it's a hard question because there's a lot of saturation.
Yeah, I think the last conference I did was in London with I think Frank Abagnale was one of the keynote speakers and spoke right before. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
He's from Raleigh, NC, which I was in for a bit.
Yeah, he's been with the agency like 41 years or something like that, just like an insane amount of time. But I don't have any more questions on my side. Alton, you've been kind of quiet. I'm sure you've got some stuff to talk about. Why don't you go ahead and put it out there?
Yeah, no, I just want to say I appreciate, just because for me, I was telling Mike not too long ago that I don't really have a lot of experience when it comes to like testing SCADA systems and things like that. So this is a really good, session for me to kind of learn and, kind of see what's out there on the other side of the fence. And, definitely appreciate the information around the education system and certifications because, we've been like talking to a lot of students who are coming out of boot camps and they're like clueless on what they want to do. Right. They're like, hey, I just paid all of this money and I'm trying to figure out what I want to do. And, should I go blue team or red team? And, you go to ask, well, what do you enjoy? Do you like coding? Do you like hacking? And they're just, confused. And so, I really got a lot of information out of that, would be really great for me to pass on. So that was super helpful. But yeah, other than that, I mean, I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, it would. I do get people hitting me up for like what code boot camps should I join, stuff like that, like code boot camps, what security boot camps, things like that. And I look at the curriculums and I typically go, well, this shit's gonna be deprecated next year. I don't. That's a hard one. If people are coming to you with that and saying what should he do, that's a hard position to be in.
Yeah, that's a really tough one.
Yeah, it's crazy because like I've started seeing so many more boot camps come out, these days. And even when we go to look for like talent, everybody has the same thing in their title, and they've all come to the same. And so it's really hard to even find, good people.
Yeah, I think it's there are a few people out there that figured out how to commoditize certain practices, and they follow the approach. Our CMO just apprised me to this recently, called Maya, most advanced yet acceptable. They market the thing that's gonna, it sounds really cool, but if it's any more cool than that, you're just gonna, poop it out of your head. And I think that there are schools and some programs out there that will try and say, hey, it's easy, just do these couple things and you'll have a, high 5 or 6-figure salary in no time. And it's hard because it's a hard thing to navigate because they're really kind of taking advantage of some people that really want to make a career change.
Big
And
time.
in my personal opinion, not everyone can do the most technical of stuff, but that
Right,
doesn't
right.
mean you can't do adjacent stuff and still contribute to trying to make the world a safer place.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like if you're at a point where like there are certain things you can't comprehend, like that's fine. Just do what you can do and you can learn the rest. You know,
Yeah.
like you can learn what you need to.
Yeah, I always tell people I can teach a chimpanzee to run, a sock platform, to run an arc site, to run a dart trace. I can teach a monkey to do that, but
Yeah.
I can't teach the mindset. I can't teach the creativity, and I can't teach the passion. And without those three things, you might as well pack it up and find another industry, because without those three things in our industry, you're broke.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you do have to have you've got to have a student mindset.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to have I believe a core acumen to build from.
Yeah, for sure.
And a direction. Yeah.
Yep.
But
So that being said, I'm going to open up the questions to the people listening. I know we have something like 20 people online right now. It's pretty good. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and put it into the chat, and I'll ask Mike, and we can go from there. One thing I did want to talk about, I talked to a retired colonel from the Israeli Defense Forces, Security Forces.
Mhm.
And, of course, they have to serve so many years in the military when they graduate, school, whatever. And that's part of their normal lifespan, right? That's part of their normal life. And I think that, after looking at that and thinking about, the different presidents we've had and politics in general, I really think the U.S. needs to go to a more militarized type of government. I know that may sound bad in some areas, but I think that, as far as the president goes, if he wants to run for president, he should have to at least have served 4 years in the military. If you're going to be chief, chief of all of the military, I would expect some sort of, serving some sort of time, whether it be reserves or, a 4-year stint, just to know where those people came from. But the one thing I found with the security industry and the military, and I think that you can attest this to as well, Mike, is that when we get that security clearance, our value goes way up on the outside. And I think the biggest problem that the military has right now is retention, right? So they give us these top secret security clearances with polygraphs. And we can go get a job in cybersecurity making 4 times as much as we made in the military. And that's a big hurdle that the U.S. Military is having to jump right now, is trying to figure out a way to retain soldiers and sailors and airmen without having to break the bank.
yeah, that's a good one. So when I got back from my second deployment, we had, it's like back in 2013, shortly after, we had a sensing session, which we get around and talk about our feelings and all that. No, it was a bit more nuanced, but it was basically just getting feedback. Getting feedback from the lower level type guys like me that were doing stuff versus like the company and team commanders.
Right.
And it was just a bunch of us enlisted types with the battalion sergeant major.
Yeah.
So and it was really just trying to gauge like what was going on, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the initial things that this guy talked about was, we have a lot of smart people leaving USASOC, but like they go off and they become millionaires or whatever. But we need that here. And when I think of it, like when I got out, for me, a lot of things were a struggle. And because there were a lot of things that was a struggle, like, if I didn't find a job soon, the GI Bill wasn't going to protect me forever. I was going to, get kicked out of my apartment. I was going to lose my car, et cetera, et cetera. I needed to keep pushing for those things. But then when I got to a certain point, I realized that the military, the way it is, or the way it was, it might have, dude, it's been like 7, 8 years for me. So a lot of things have changed. Like a lot of the people I used to work with are all teachers at SWIC now.
Yeah.
It's easy to get pigeonholed. And if you want to branch out, do other stuff, it's not always easy.
Yeah.
So for me, I never planned to stay in more than 4 years. But if I did, I know that I would have been disappointed and probably depressed at some point, because I would have come to probably some of the same conclusions that I did now, and realize that I can't do a lot from inside, right?
Oh yeah.
Like being an outsider to a lot of things has helped expand perspective, and I really think it is. I think that there needs to be a sense of autonomy present.
Yeah, for sure.
Because the accountability is you have personable accountability, like right uniform, right place, right time, but you don't have autonomy. And you might earn it at some point, but even that is contextual depending on where you're working in. So I think having a sense of autonomy, knowing that your voice will be heard. Now, this is going to sound bad. I don't think that every person should always have a voice.
Yeah.
And I defer. Now, I'm not sure if you've watched that Seth MacFarlane show, The Orville.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But there's an episode where they go to a planet where the entire planet is ruled by a pure democracy. Like everyone has like a red down arrow or a green up arrow after they turn 18, and every single like say if you wear the wrong thing, someone can come up to you and just downvote you, and then it gets like shared across the internet, right?
It's like a bad Reddit.
Yes, and it's a pure democracy. And democratic elections will, the results of that will take, but by elections, I mean like they'll elect is putting oil into the harbor a bad thing?
Yeah.
Well, the elections prove it's not, so that's fact. And obviously we're not there, but I do think that I don't know. I just kind of think that like going back to the terms of military service, you said, I've often talked to like personal friends saying that, hey, military service for everyone might be a good thing, but only for that perspective building, really, because you get taken out of where you're from, you get put in all these uncomfortable situations, you learn how to defend yourselves and the people next to you. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're from. That person who might be a tad different from you is going to protect you and you them. Like that's it. That's the core of it. And then with that foundation, you go wherever from there. Like I think that's cool, but I'm also really against telling people they have to do something.
yeah, exactly. I battle with that with the military, like having to serve 2 years. But I look at the countries that have been involved, and it just seems like our millennial like culture, is far worse than most other countries' millennial culture, because they've had to like go through that 2 years of getting your ass kicked and waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning and actually being an adult for a while.
Yeah, well, like not a lot of people appreciate what they have, and that was actually a recent Instagram story. at taco_the_boss.
Nice.
I had posted something like freedom is to the American citizen what water is to a fish. You
True.
don't understand it if you're born into it. You've got to be taken out of it to know.
Exactly.
It's like a couple of divers, like deep sea divers, jump in the ocean and go, "Hey man, the water is great," and the fish go, "The fuck's water?"
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with that as well. Steve had a question really quick. Let's see here. He says, what are the top recommendations you'd give to companies that operate IoT? He's on audio right now, so you guys can converse, but that was his question, Mike.
Yeah. Number one, don't put your shit on the internet. Number two, if there's a business case for it, I would definitely look at, oh, I can't remember this for the life of me, but there is recently a new directive that was put out. It's basically a conglomeration of NIST standards that says if you have to put shit on the internet, follow these. I would just Google something like IoT or ICS Internet Security Standards NIST in quotations or something, and you should find it, because I found it a few months back. I think there was a NIST standard specifically that was being written specific to ICS and IoT and the internet. But yeah, first piece I would say, don't put it on the internet. Secondly, I would say make observation of the Purdue model, which it used to be a networking framework based on physical networking when things were very serial, like it was serialized connections and whatnot. And now things aren't very serial unless you get to like level the level 0 devices maybe. But even then, the Purdue model should still serve I believe it should still serve as a networking guideline. It might not be all serial, but at the same time, segmenting things out in those layers will give you control, pretty much. Yeah,
True. Very true.
So segmentation from top down, and then obviously segmenting it, completely separating it from your IT network. Don't run a flat network if you can help it, because last thing you need is like a Phobos malware moving laterally to your fucking Windows machine.
Yeah, to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Any more? Go ahead.
No.
Go ahead, Mike.
No, I was gonna say that was pretty much it for that. I mean, that'd probably be the best advice I'd give. And then if there's anything a bit more, granular, I'd be happy to answer. Just hit me up on LinkedIn.
Cool. So do you have any, have you messed with Raspberry Pis? I know that, so one of my first SCADA deployments of a SCADA platform was on a Raspberry Pi. Do you have any Raspberry Pi projects that you work on or that you're thinking about working on? Or
I don't work on them anymore just because the time slots I have are pretty filled with full-time and startup and family and all that. But a couple of years back, the talk I did at B-Sides RDU, I did, it was a long talk. I went way over time. I cut into people's lunches and people had to leave, but the really hardcore people stayed. So
nice.
And that was nice because I got to talk with each and every one of them. And I was like, hey, you stayed, you sacrificed your lunch for me, thank you. Well, like half their lunch, not the whole thing, but I went through a very kind of a comprehensive round robin of different kinds of cyber physical technology, exploits and whatnot. I went through medical, I went through automotive, I went through ICS, I went through IoT as well, just like regular IoT, like doing shit over MQTT and all that.
Right.
And the Raspberry Pi projects that I did, I had two Raspberry Pi, or one project that had a Raspberry Pi 3 and a Raspberry Pi 0. And the 3 was capturing, so a buddy of mine is a diabetic, and he gave me his basically like a collection of like his old like little pods he would stick in his arm, and they would inject the insulin into his arm. And then he gave me the management console, the little handheld thing. And I had realized that like, hey, if I increase this bolus amount to X or whatever, I can dump the entire thing into somebody. Right. I can dump the remainder. As long as I put the max, whatever's in there, it'll just dump the whole thing into that person and send them into like a diabetic shock or hypoglycemia or like something dangerous at that time. And I was like, okay, cool. So I had a Raspberry Pi 3 that I was running an RTL SDR on, and I captured the radio signals to and from the devices. I was like, all right, I got that. And then the second part of the project was, well, if I'm an asshole, I ended up putting it onto a Raspberry Pi Zero, and I had like a nice little like dangling stripped wire as the antenna to transmit. It was going to transmit that same signal, so that if you had this brand of device and I wanted to just like be an ass and fly that shit like around a first watch somewhere, I was gonna get somebody hurt. Yeah, so that was it. Yeah, how to kill diabetic people. That was my Raspberry project.
Yeah, they did a kind of the same thing with my pacemaker. I think they used the St. Jude model though, and they were able to send a defib signal to the pacemaker and actually send the guy into a like the mock person into a cardiac arrest by sending that request to the pacemaker. So yeah, like the IoT side of it is pretty scary, especially all the medical devices. And I've got the double whammy of having to have a pacemaker plus of epilepsy. So I have like the technology trifecta when it comes to screwing with me biologically. So that was one of the things that got me like really interested into medical devices and stuff like that. I think we did a pen test on the East Coast for a hospital, me and my buddy Chris, when we worked for NEC. And we had an individual that there was some type of server that was connected to the operating room. And I noticed clear text credentials flying back and forth between the sysadmin and this device in the OR. And so I went to the CISO. I said, hey, look, I don't want to rain on your parade, but this is day one, and where have admins like using clear text passwords to like major devices. And he said, oh, no problem. Don't worry about it. It's Italian guy, right? It's Italian bank. Oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I said, well, this is an issue. And he said, oh, we use the same password for everybody, for all the admins. No worries, no worries. And I was like, are you kidding me right now? Like this, my pacemaker could be on your network and you're going to kill me, right? But that's the type of mindset. And that goes back to the whole purpose of like my whole point in like talking about industry and how different industries approach security differently. We're not all on the same page. Financial, way up here, right? Automotive, we're getting there. I've been approached by a couple car companies wanting to talk about security for entertainment systems, whatnot. So they're starting to open their eyes to see the risk, right? But then you have critical infrastructure, which theirs is like down here. And I think the reason being is because they feel like they have protection from the federal government for one. They have energy. They have protection from the municipalities and from the utility companies too. So they're not forced to. They're not in an uncomfortable situation yet. I think SolarWinds helped put them there, but I think it'll take a while to take hold. And I think the effects from SolarWinds as well. I talked to TechStrong TV about it. I think that the effects that SolarWinds had, we've only seen a very small percentage of what's actually happened. I think a lot of our critical infrastructure and a lot of other companies have been compromised by the nation states, and they're just, they've got that trigger, that switch ready to flip it when the time comes.
Yeah, and it's a concern of mine as well, just because so many things are out there that are open.
Absolutely.
So again, going back to like my biggest fear from earlier is that would happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So Steve says hashtag ubiquity.
I think ubiquity is one of the devices that's I'm trying to think. I don't know if it's a ubiquity device that also is on port 502, but like typically when I do a lot of searches on Shodan, I have to filter out ubiquity.
Yeah.
So that might be what he's referring to, but or it could be something I just haven't read yet.
Yeah. Well, that's about it. I don't have anything else. Do you have any questions for us, Mike? I know you've been hanging around with the Haunted Hacker crew for going on a month now, and do you have any questions for us? Anything that we can provide for you, or make things comfortable for you?
I mean, I don't really think so. Just looking for more endorsements on my Microsoft, my MS Paint endorsements.
Dude, I saw that on your LinkedIn, and I was like, that's epic. Like, I have to put that on mine now.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you don't, do you even internet? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Paint and calculator, those are like the two most wanted apps on the internet. So let's see.
I can draw a circle.
Yeah, exactly. So Steve said, I'll vote you up on Paint. Depends on which version. So anyways, I really appreciate you coming on to the show, Mike. It's been really awesome. I think next week we have Chris Sistrunk, another ICS SCADA type guy that's going to come on the show and talk to us about SCADA.
Yeah, I recently started following him on LinkedIn. I think it's because somebody referred me to him.
Yeah, he's a great guy. When I was out at Idaho National Labs, we had a red team, blue team symposium type deal. And so they tested all of us and determined who's going to go red team, who's going to go blue team. I was on the red team. I believe Chris was on the blue team. Before we had broken into our teams, I'd already taken over the security systems, the cameras, and was like painting around, whatever. I'd taken over all the screens on the wall that they had connected to the SCADA systems and was playing solitaire in front of the classroom. So what it boiled down to was this whole big weekend or this whole week of red team, blue team, and we get to the competition part. And, you know, they divide us up. We go into our separate rooms or buildings. And I had flipped somebody on the internal side of the blue team. So they put paper in the door jamb and allowed me to get into their compound. And I was just unplugging cables. And before anybody could figure out what was going on, shit was going haywire. So there's actually a video that Chris found on the internet. Chris was in my class for that red team thing. And they duct taped me and drugged me out of the blue team compound, and they got it on video and they put it on YouTube. So it was pretty epic. It's pretty funny. But that was like one of my first introductions into SCADA. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, you should definitely post that in the Discord.
I will.
I watch that.
I think I posted it like last week when Chris originally found it, but I'll grab it again and post it tonight.
If you can, because for me that's a lot of scrolling. I don't know if I can.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, it was a pretty epic deal. Like I had already destroyed the network. At one point when we were like first being debriefed in the class, they were going over the pumping and the schema, and they had like the actual pumps with fluid on the wall. And so I started attacking. I found like I wasn't paying attention to like the instructions like as usual, and just like listening to what was going on, but also like fumbling around through the network trying to figure out what the fuck was going on. And I found that pump. And as they're speaking, talking about the whole engagement for the week, I'm making a pumps overflow and I have to yank Ethernet cables out of the thing. So, but that was back when SCADA was like first, hot onto the scene. And I think Metasploit had just produced the very first modules for SCADA pen testing within Metasploit right before that class. It was really cool. One more question, last question from Derek. He says, any recommendation on SensePost red team training?
What red team training?
SensePost.
SensePost.
Yeah, SensePost is very old school. SensePost has been around for a very long time. They have their own red team training. I'll go ahead and fill that question real quick. So SensePost red team training is really good. I would look for more of the government, sponsored red team training. NSA does a really good job over their red team, blue team symposium that happens in Bethesda, I think every May or so. So you may want to check into that. Other than that, the military has a lot of red team training. You're not going to find a whole lot of really in-depth red team training on the commercial sector unless they're ex-military or private military organization. Because red team, the term red team came from the U.S. military. So that's it. Next week we have, I believe, Chris Sistrunk. The week after that, I think we have Kane Gamble. I don't know if you guys know him, but he was the British hacker who hacked into John Brennan, head of the CIA's email accounts, and spent some time in prison for it. He's out now, and he's actually with us in the Discord. So
nice.
Yeah. So we have a couple of those guys. We have him. We have Ghost Exodus. He still kind of floats around a little bit. me and a couple other people who have been down the dark road and decided to come help out the light side. So yeah, it would be pretty cool. But again, Mike, dude, I really appreciate you coming on. It's been a blast, and hopefully,
same here, man.
yeah, hopefully you'll stick with the group and Discord and contribute and help us out where we can.
The only one I actually actively check out. So
cool, awesome. Well, I'm glad it's ours. Alton, I want to thank you for jumping on and help me co-host. And I'll see you guys next weekend. If there's any questions you have that we haven't answered, send it to me in Discord or just throw it in Discord. One of us will answer it. Of course, like always, there's Patreon where you can contribute money. There's a Teespring store where you can buy merchandise. All the merchandise proceeds, all the Teespring, all the Patreon stuff goes to the podcasting gear and time on Zoom and stuff to make this free for y'all. So if you want to contribute or get involved, please let me know. We're opening up the podcast for newbies. So if you're new into the industry, I do want to talk to you. I want to talk to you and figure out what brought you to our industry and kind of build that psychological profile. So if you're new, send me a message on Discord. I'd like to set up a time where we can actually bring you on the podcast and do a show and get some of that information from you. That's it. I will see you guys next week. Thanks, Mike.
Sweet. Thanks, Mike. We appreciate it.
take care, guys.
See you guys.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye.